love being Catholic. I love it because our Catholic faith is a universal faith. Universal faith, which means we can speak all languages. No matter where you go. You could go in the middle of nowhere, Timbuktu. If they hold a host, a priest validly celebrates the Mass and holds a host in front of you and he says, "Lama dama ding dong." You know the answer to that? Amen. Because we have a universal language, that means we have a way to know who God is, ... Our Baltimore Catechism, and that's where I'm from, has a great definition of who God is. God is, and you heard it in the first reading from the Book of Wisdom, God is omnipotent, so powerful, conquers even death itself. God is omnibenevolent. That means loves all, even sinners. God is also omniscient. That means God is all-knowing. God knew exactly what to do in a field where it was planted weed-free. But God also knew an enemy is out there to sow seeds that will destroy us. And there are going to be times in your faith life after you leave the clarity of Steubenville's weekend retreat, where God becomes a little bit more clear for you. You're going to go home and you're going to experience lack of clarity. And what do I do with my soul? I thought I was being so good, and all of a sudden these weeds of destructiveness keep coming in. Am I just going to abandon it altogether? Well, you know what that means? It means if you really want to take the message of this weekend with you, I need you to learn God's language better. And God's language is theology. I need you to learn theology. The word theology is simply the two Greek words logos, the word, theo, of God. Unfortunately, we have replaced a lot of our teachings no longer with theology, but sociology. We start to believe about God what everyone else is saying about God, as opposed to what God is saying about himself to us. We need to learn this language better, because if we learn theology better, we're going to be able to do something. Discern what to do with these weeds that are cropping up in my soul. You know, the only reason why our speaking team, our priests, our musicians, the only reason why we can get up here right now is because we're here to admit something to you. We have weeds in us. I'm here to admit we have weeds. Granted, I would totally love to be weed-free. But we're not. Because I don't live in a bubble. We live in the world where there is an enemy out there planting seeds within us. And you know why? Because we're asleep in our faith. That's why Christ is saying, pray always. Live your faith like someone who is vigilant. Because if not, the devil, he or she, and I like to use inclusive language when I talk about the devil, he or she is cunning and will plant seeds of destruction in us. And you know who allows that to happen? I do. So I've got to fight. But at the same time, I have to tell you the reason why we as a speaking team and as a university that espouses the Catholic faith is because we know we're not perfect. All I've got to do is try to manage my sins better. And that's what I want you all to do. Go home and manage your life better. It's not going to be perfect. I remember when I got my car, Subaru XT Coupe. It was white. It looked like a spaceship. And in it, I was awesome. And I would drive around, and as soon as I would get home, I would look and be like, what the? I just cleaned this. How did I get dirt on my car? Duh, I drove it in the streets where there's dirt. I'm really smart, can you tell? So what would I have to do? Manage it. If I wanted to keep my car clean, I would have to keep it clean. But if I was one of those people who were Puritans and said, I don't ever want to, go out into the street because I'm afraid that I might get my car dirty, then I would keep my car in the garage. And you know what that means? I wouldn't look cool in it. See, your faith is a vehicle that's supposed to take you from here into the next life, heaven. And yes, on the road to heaven, you are going to fall. You are going to stumble. You are going to struggle. That does not mean you're a hypocrite. Because that's a big temptation, isn't it? I love it when people talk about our Catholic faith. It's like, I don't like organized religions. So I tell them, join a disorganized one. I don't care. Do what you want to do. But you join a disorganized religion, you're going to have no way to get to heaven, because disorganized religions have no theology, no logic, logos of God. That's why I need you to be theologians. And you're thinking, but I want to study something else. I'm sorry. You can't live your life without studying the Word, the logic of God. Sure, you can study science, you can study biology, you can study, cooking. Study it with God, and it turns into a worldwide apostolate, gracebeforemeals.com, right? Because we have a responsibility to make sure that our faith is not separate from life, and our life is messy. And therefore, we've got to learn how to do something. We've got to learn how to weed whack sometimes. We've got to manage our lawns by mowing it and watering it and being very attentive of other things that are happening to it. But we can't live a sterile life. I was living a kind of a puritanical, sterile life by not putting my car out of the garage because I was afraid I was going to get it dirty. It's like your grandmothers who would put, plastic on furniture. What would be the point of it? Or it would be like this. Have you ever been to these places where they have such pristine lawns? You can't even walk on it. What would be the point? Fact is, lawns are made for walking and enjoying. What's more beautiful, a beautiful park or a park with a family having a picnic on it? And the fact is, on that picnic, your dog is going to come with you. And you know what that dog is going to do? And guess what you have to do to keep that lawn clean? Manage it. Clean it up. What I'm asking you to do is not rely on a fatalistic faith. A faith that says, oh, but everything is not perfect, and if I'm not perfect, I'm just going to give it up. You know what happens when that happens? We just simply end. And I know too many people who will look at their life and they're going to say, Steubenville is awesome. And then I go home, and my parents are yelling at each other. My girlfriend broke up with me. I'm failing math. And I'm struggling with sins. It just means you got a lot of weeds. And you have to manage them better. But what do? Do you just end it all? Isn't that why marriage, a holy vocation of marriage, and are there married couples here? Thank you for showing us how to manage the weeds. Is your spouse perfect? Don't lie, there's a whole bunch of priests here. Her husband is not perfect, and neither is she. Which means they have to manage their sinfulness, which means don't let it become greater than the fruits. The reason why Steubenville is so awesome is because God's flowers are growing in you more clearly here, because we, the team, and our service assistants, were clipping the weeds as you come through. That's what's happening. When you go home, you're going to experience God not in via positiva, you're going to experience God in via negativa. And via negativa is a very important part of our Catholic theology. And it only took me so many years of seminary to realize I need to learn via negativa more. It's called apophatic theology. I know this is a big word, but you're not stupid. And you are required to learn via negativa. Because when you leave here, you're going to experience God more in the negative sometimes than in the positive. St. Thomas Aquinas said this about via negativa, apophatic theology if we're using the Greek. He's using Latin, via negativa, apophatic theology, which simply means we can say a lot of positive things about God. God is love, God is justice, God is mercy. But if we say that God is love and says, therefore I am allowed to love my girlfriend anytime I want, then maybe you don't have a full understanding of love. I can tell you this more definitely via negativa. God is not impatient lust. Do you see the difference? It's like math, and since I'm Asian, I'm really good at it. It's like two negatives make a, and do you know why? Because when you put two negatives together, what does it make? It makes the cross of Christ. You see, what we don't want to do in our faith is we don't want to leave here and go out there because we're going to experience the messiness and we're going to experience the fact that, yeah, I'm responsible for letting people sow seeds of division and sin in me. And then when you look at this whole thing, you think, oh my gosh, it's so pathetic, I'm just going to give it all up. You cannot give it up. You will stay at an immature level. And this is why I'm really encouraging you to learn some theology, because you have to grow up in your faith. Which means you can't talk like a baby anymore. You're going to have to talk like someone who has the answer to the world's questions when they say, then who is God? And you're going to be able to say, God is not only in the good times in life, but in the bad times in life. When you're rich and when you're poor. Not just when you're healthy, but even when you're sick. Doesn't that sound like a committed relationship? And you can only be in one if you're mature in your knowledge of what love really means. So I'm encouraging you to grow up in our faith, because I've met too many people. In my walk in life as a priest member of a secular institute, my job is to go into the world. And I meet a lot of people who have no idea what Steubenville is. They're like, what's Stupidville? I'm like, you're stupid if you don't know it, right? But there's like 50, 60-year-old businessmen who have like multi-billion-dollar corporations, but they pray like a 14-year-old when they ended confirmation. They're these mature people, but their spiritualities are flabby and childish. Let's make sure that we recognize the green of our field of souls that is fertile, but also recognize how to manage the natural cropping up of evil weeds that come up, never letting it overwhelm us to the point where we just give up and despair, because God isn't going to do that with you. God is so patient because He is omniscient. He knows that if He pulls up the wheat, He pulls up the weeds, He might also destroy the wheat. So here's a message for you, priests, brother priests, as well as youth ministers. Be patient when your teenagers act like idiots. They're just learning how to grow up in their faith. Teens, be patient when you see your priests or your youth ministers not acting the full Christian life. Because guess what? If you are wise enough, you're going to realize something. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. There was one group, I can't remember where you are, but there was one group that said, Father Leo, can you please be my parish priest? And I said, you honestly wouldn't want me to be your parish priest. I'm fun in small doses. And do you know why I know that? Because I know what my weeds are. I know that I can do this work well because I'm able to manage the bad things that are natural to me. And I try, therefore, to let the good things shine. And I know that because I'm studying theology and living it more than just talking about it. I tell you this, brothers and sisters, because our team, we're praying for you, that you don't just go home and be like, yeah, Jesus, I love him. I'm all Jesusified. And then you go home and you act like a jerk to your parents. That's not going to happen, right? Don't lie, we're in church. We are. And your parents are going to say, oh, this whole Steubenville thing was a waste. I'm not sending you next year. And you know what I'm going to say to them? Mom, please send me next year again. Because I need this lawn cut and weeded next year. And you can do that every Sunday when we begin the Mass by saying, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. Because remember, folks, we are not a hotel for saints, but a hospital for sinners. And only when I figured that out could I make the next step and say yes to the priesthood, because I do not deserve it. I do not deserve it. I do not deserve this. And the only reason why I can do this is because I finally get enough courage to trust in God's omnibenevolence, omnipotence, and omniscience. That God called me despite my brokenness. I came across a quote because I was so depressed. I didn't want to do what you heard me say it. I didn't want to become a priest because I thought I was going to mess up more than do good. And even my spiritual director said the same thing. Thanks a lot. But he said, if you do it, you will mess up because you're broken. If you let God's omnipotence do it in you, despite your impotency and your ignorance, not omniscience, and the fact that your understanding of love is sometimes limited to just a body part, then God can do good things in you, Leo Patalinghug. And he can do good things in every one of you. The quote that I came across was simple. It simply reminded me that every saint had a past. Every sinner has a future. And between now and the time we become saints, we're always going to be a broken church. And don't let anyone say anything bad about the church that you can't just simply have a response for it. Cardinal Dolan, my rector at the college where I went to seminary, told me about a letter he received from a woman who was complaining about the church. People will, because there's a lot of weeds in this field we call the Catholic faith. But in God's wisdom, he will purify it. In God's wisdom, he even knows that even weeds have a purpose for burning. God can do that. And Cardinal Dolan got this letter from this very angry person saying, and I'm leaving the Catholic Church because there's pedophiles, you're just asking for money all the time, the priests are boring, and nuns are mean, and the people in the church are hypocrites. I don't know if that's what she sounded like, but that's what it sounds like to me, right? And Cardinal Dolan simply wrote this letter back to her and said, ma'am, I understand. We are truly an imperfect church. And I'd certainly hope you find a perfect church. But when you find it, please don't join it. Because as soon as you do, you will make that perfect church imperfect. Let's humbly recognize our ability to speak with God, theology, is imperfect right now. We'll get better at it when you continue to mature in your faith. And when you do, you're going to be able to go out into this dirty world and give an answer to a question that everyone is asking. God is ...